The moment I knew I have to get out of this relationship. I watched my best friend pass away horribly in an accident. Was there when it happened, rode with him to the hospital in the ambulance, was standing there when the doctors pronounced him, waited there until the folks from the morgue downstairs came to get him, then called his family and told them. That all took pretty much the entire night, and I had an exam the previous day, so I'd pulled an all-nighter then as well, so by the end of it, I'd been awake for about 49 hours. Came staggering into my apartment at 6 a.m., saw my fiancé and burst into tears. I told him what happened. He stared at me for a sec, then said, "You know we're supposed to have a breakfast date with Chris and Annie in like an hour. Are you seriously going to bail on that?" "Yep, broke up with him that evening when I woke up. I've never regretted it." Wow, he's not insensitive at all. Story 2. I walked in on my girlfriend in bed with another woman. They had all of a sudden become best friends in less than a month. Trust me, lesbian intimacy is not nearly as attractive when you're in love with one of the participants. Not unless it's arranged. Story 3. We were having this conversation about open relationships for the 10th time when it suddenly dawned on me that I never wanted to have this conversation again. I told him, I think you should fool with whoever you want." His face brightened. "You do?" he asked incredulously. "Yes," I said. "It's obviously very important to you, so I'm going to be out by the end of the week, and then you will be completely free to do as you please." That was the end. Story 4. Working a new job with a 1-year-old baby, still breastfeeding, my drive wasn't what it normally is. Phone bill comes in, $200 worth of phone intimacy charges. I sit him down, remind him that our budget was way too tight for that. Explain I don't have a problem with phone intimacy per se, but if we had $200 to spend, I'd let him get a couple of whistles from street workers if he needed to blow off steam that bad. But we don't have an extra $200 right now. He apologizes. We have a good discussion about getting our intimacy on the right track. Next month's cell phone bill is $800. It was higher than our rent at the time. We literally could not pay the bill. I found I actually could afford more by moving out. He spent more than he made even without the crazy phone intimacy charges. And that's why some people stay broke. Story 5. My ex-girlfriend never really got along with my family. Too many minor things had happened that caused a strain in the relationship. There were 2 cases that led me to realize there was no way in hell that we would work out. One was when she told me, "Once we get married, you're stuck with me, and if you ever think of divorcing me, I'll keep everything you ever worked for and make your life hell." Mind you, this was about 6 months into our relationship. Later on, she said, "Once we get married, you will no longer speak to your family. No contacts through their siblings or your mother." I ended that relationship not long after that. Not even a prison is that restrictive. Story 6. This all happened on Skype, only typing. Him. "I need to tell you something that's been bothering me." Me. "What is it?" Him. "Last time we had intimacy, I noticed you have a hair on your chest. It really ruined the moment for me." Me. "What?" Him. "Yeah, it's really gross. Please pluck it. Also, I feel really disrespected and undervalued in this relationship because you don't try hard enough to be pretty for me." Me. "Are you freaking serious?" Him. Reasonable adults can take constructive criticism. I think the fact that you were angry with me shows that you're really immature." Yep, that was the end for me. I think there's nothing going on up there for him. Story 7. When I started having to pay the price for messed up things her previous boyfriends had done, she would yell at me as though I was the one that hit her, never touched her in that way her previous boyfriend had. She started trying to interrogate me because she was convinced I, like a different previous boyfriend, was cheating on her. I never cheated. Come to think of it, I ended a number of my relationships when I realized that women were running me through a gauntlet in reaction to their past romantic injuries. Story 8. I was living in Florida, homesick for New York, fighting with a crazy blonde girl I'd moved in with. Suddenly in the bathroom, she threw a right hook. I blocked it. She threw a left. I blocked that too. As I stood there holding both her wrists, she kicked me square. In the 4 or 5 seconds I had before the pain kicked in, I threw her in a tight lock. Together we fell to the floor of the bathroom, locked in combat and screaming at one another. Over her muffled screams, writhing beneath the toilet, I had a moment of intense, overwhelming clarity. As I stared curiously at the dirt and grime around the base of the bowl, a calm stole over me. It was at that exact moment that I knew the relationship was over. All of the fighting, all of the caring, all of the stupid crap I'd done to keep things going. It all seemed so totally absurd. Every ounce of desire I had to still be with her was completely gone. So I let go of my girlfriend and started laughing hysterically. My laughter took all the wind out of her sails. Instantly there was fear in her eyes. "What?" she asked. "Why are you laughing?" But I only shook my head and smiled. I was already thinking about whether I wanted to sell my motorcycle and fly home or somehow drive it back to New York City. Within days, I sold my stuff and moved out. She begged and pleaded, of course, but the decision had been made. I'm still in New York and happier than ever, but I'll never forget the floor under that toilet. What if she just wanted to play fight? Story 9. When I was curled up in his arms, a bit teary over something and just wanted to be held. It sounds funny writing it out, but at the time it really knocked some sense into me. He was constantly pressuring me for sexy times, and I always had to be on guard around him because he was always trying to cram his hands down. I couldn't even kiss him without him trying to turn it into a full-on makeout session. He even had to start wearing baggy clothes around him because if I wore anything the slightest bit revealing, he would be all over me twice as bad. That is, when he didn't start witching at me to take my clothes off the second we got behind a closed door. In some ways, it was my fault, because I was struggling with realizing I wasn't attracted to men at all, so obviously he wasn't getting a lot of fun, but he really didn't respect my boundaries or my wishes. Say what you want about desperation, but if I was trying to fool around with someone and all they did was stare at the ceiling and act really sad or out of it, I would stop. I'm now happily in a relationship with a female who respects me, and if there's anything intimacy going on, we both want it just as much. Story 10. Late to the party, but hey. When I was a sophomore, I had my first girlfriend. She was a senior and pretty damn attractive, if I do say so. I was feeling pretty good about myself. Anyway, I'd been dating for about 2 months when we decided to hang out at her house for the first time. She gave me the grand tour of her house. Made out, went to her room, made out, and so on. She showed me some cool things she had collected over the years, and as we were going through her jewelry box, I noticed a particularly cool-looking ring. "What's the story behind this one?" I ask. "Oh," she responds. "And that's just a ring from my fiancé. Turns out he was out of town for a while. In Iraq." Story 11. We had been dating for about 3 years and had just moved in together. One night we went to a show and we both had gone quite trashed. I was laying limp in the booth and a lesbian friend of ours was taking care of me, wiping the sweat off my forehead as we waited for our cab. When we got home, my ex lays into me about flirting with a lesbian friend. To prove that I don't love her, she locks herself in the bedroom and says she's going to end herself. Being an idiot who believed her, I broke the door down. She then began punching me. I backpedaled until we were in the living room. I had enough, so I grabbed her by the arms and shoved her down. "Oh, that's it. You just harmed me. I'm calling the cops." She locked herself in the bathroom. I just sat limp on the couch and waited for the cops to show up. Except she didn't call the cops. She called my mother at 2 a.m. When I sobered up and woke up, I decided it was time to go our separate ways. Story 12. When I realized I was ashamed to be associated with him. His awkwardness, refusal to get help for obvious Tourette's or even acknowledge he has it, while wanting to be an actor. Yeah, that's gonna be fine. Nobody will notice. Stilted conversation, asinine behavior and comments, poor recognition of what is appropriate and lack of personal hygiene, especially down there, made me miserable. Oh, and of course I would do anything to avoid intimacy with him. A combination of because he was awful and because of aforementioned lack of hygiene. Getting in the relationship at all was a huge mistake. I was lonely and fat girl flattered who was into me. But those should never be reasons why you get with someone. Now I'm in a great relationship and I've lost the extra weight. Story 13. Let me preface this story by admitting I had absolutely no self-respect at this time in my life, and this was my first serious relationship, which started in high school. We had been living together for about 4 months during college and she wanted to break up. However, she didn't want me to leave because she just wanted to date other people to see what it was like. Instead of telling her to screw off and asking her, why would you ever think that would ever be appropriate for either of us while we were still living together? I took the low self-esteem route and said yes. Nothing changed. We were still in the same relationship after this. We were still sleeping together and we went on with our daily lives like the conversation never happened. I found out later, however, she was telling all her friends how we weren't together anymore. Things began to go south quickly, as they often do in this situation. Every time I felt I had had enough, I would tell her I was leaving. She would practically beg me to stay and I didn't have the guts to say no. I finally knew it was over when I heard her having intimacy with another guy in her house. This wasn't like I was out and then walked in and heard it. This was the middle of the day, on my day off, now sitting on the couch in the living room. It was probably the single most painful and liberating experience in my life. I was gone 2 days after that. I vowed to never let anyone walk on me the way she did again. I'm so happy with the person I am today, and the person that I'm with because I found a good person I don't feel trapped by. And wouldn't bat an eye for a second to tell her to screw off as she said we were on a break. I say that because I know she would say the same thing. We both know we deserve to be treated well because that's how we want to be treated. Exactly. Story 14. After being diagnosed with 2 mental conditions that changed my world and being forced to take a year off grad school because of them, my ex, who I had dated for 4 years, promised to be at my side and help me through this. That month, she started sleeping with a friend of mine, telling me lies and forcing me to believe that I needed her. It didn't take me long to find out, and after 5 months of that, I was finally able to end things with her. 2 years later, I'm working through grad school with my crap in order and the sweetest girl at my side. Jeez, these OPs are making me feel better about my breakup. Story 15. I have two, from ex-girlfriends that came one after the other. One ex-girlfriend I had drank bleach to get my attention. I kid you not. Bleach. She didn't do this once, but freaking twice. She drank a few capfuls, not in front of me, and was rushed to the hospital by her mother. Second time she did it, the nurse jokingly asked what flavor she drank. Bleach came in different scents or flavors in our country. Her family said it was the reason for all her sufferings. We lasted for over a year. I'll expand on this more if people ask for it. She's physically okay though, by the way. Next ex-girlfriend came after Miss Bleach, being single till a year after. We hit it off okay for 2 to 3 months. She started acting strange and too possessive, to the point she was too obsessed. We were in a long-distance relationship after the 4th month because I had to move out of the place. She just got to the point that she slept in the streets just because she wanted to see me and not having enough money to go to my place. At one point, she said she was pregnant. She was rushing the wedding or living together part, and I wasn't even sure if I was the dad. She's pregnant now, and I seriously do not know what the heck happened. Story 16. It wasn't when he left me at a bar to fool the girl in my truck. It wasn't when I found excess Victoria's Secret garments in his bed, when I could have fit into their XL panties. It wasn't when he dragged me through downtown Toronto because I wasn't walking fast enough. P.S. I walk with a cane. It wasn't when he threw me to the ground and started kicking me when one of his friends bought me a beer at a concert. It wasn't when he wouldn't allow me to eat anything other than 1 cup of white rice a day. It was when an older black gentleman at Costco told me I had beautiful eyes and that I could tell the heavens would sing at my smile. It was really ridiculous, but he was so nice that I burst into tears. I was then dragged to the car. When we got back to the apartment, he was screaming and it bit him. It was the only move available to me, and he stopped. He let go of me, but I was so afraid of the look in his eyes that I ran and never looked back. Story 17. The 5th or so time I had to talk to my ex about how when I say no, I would not like that or I would be upset if you did that, means exactly what I said. It does not mean I would secretly like it or secretly find it romantic or that I would just pretend to be angry. And he blew past some of my comfort zones despite these talks and being surprised that I reacted exactly as I said I would and was not happy with him was my time to bail moment. Other fun stories include an ex that faked a medical issue to get out of anything he did not want to do. The guy I was dating who asked me out by adding that he wanted to buy a weapon and gets more money from his parents when in a relationship. A guy I was starting a relationship with that informed me he was actually very controlling, possessive, and attempted to end it all multiple times when his previous girlfriend tried to leave him, and then was shocked when I promptly ended all contact. The guy I was seeing who decided to come clean and admit he already had a girlfriend and then tried to kiss me immediately after. And my first boyfriend who told me I was about 15 pounds heavier than the girls he usually dated, then grabbed and honked. I know how to pick him, you guys. That's a powerful roster. Story 18. When I began to catch myself standing in the shower, fantasizing about what I would do if she would just hit me a little bit harder and told me just a little bit worse. I wanted to repay her for slapping me every time I did something she didn't want me to do. She would dismiss whatever protest I offered and refuse to modify her behavior while constantly asking me to modify mine. I would get into the shower and be alone with my thoughts, which would inevitably turn to intimacy. It was a shower and I was 17. She, being my source for intimacy, would pop in my head and I would remember whatever she had done that day to let me know I had displeased her. What if she had hit me just a little harder? How could I have inflicted the most damage in retaliation just to show her the error of her ways? Maybe throw an elbow or a knee to the ribs? Both? I would stand in these reveries for 5-10 minutes and all of a sudden return to the shower. My hands would be clenched into fists and I would have to consciously uncurl my fingers. The rest of the shower would be spent in utter horror not only at the idea that I was capable of such thoughts, but that I did not know for how long I just entertained them. I immediately pulled my emotional chips from that table, but didn't call it quits for a few months. Didn't want to upset the social structure of high school with a big breakup. What the hell ever. Story 19. We had fought badly last year. He turned 40 in April of that year, and I spent $2,500 in a big party for him, got him an iPad and a new watch. In July, I told him I felt it was best for us both if I moved out. His reply, "It's okay. I know you love someone else and have been having an affair." Face palm. I told him I was not in love with anyone, nor had I been having an affair, which I was constantly accused of through our relationship. I thought we could endure me moving out and eventually would work things out. As my birthday neared, he brought some flowers and put them in front of me and asked me if I had plans for the next day, my birthday. Our relationship at this point was strained worse than my Spanx. I said I had plans with a really close friend. My sister and I were born on the same day, 3 years apart. On my birthday, nothing. No happy birthday. A day later, nothing. Then I get a text from my sister asking me to thank him for wishing her a happy birthday. That was it. For him to purposely try to hurt my feelings like that, I couldn't continue our relationship even if I moved out because he did this type of thing all the time. Deliberately hurting me or to rile me up to fight. I know that it may sound petty calling up what I bought him or did when you were not to expect anything back, but to not acknowledge my own birthday when every year we were together and made every effort to give him a lavish party with friends and family, it was indicative of his behavior and his nastiness. I walked away and never looked back. It hurt, and I went through a really rough time the first few months, and I still love him very much, but we're not compatible anymore. I won't be with anyone who would intentionally hurt someone, whether emotionally or physically. Sounds like a man-child. Story 20. I basically dated my ex-boyfriend's mother. When we got into a fight, he told his mom and she mediated. Literally, solved our fights for us because he couldn't do it himself. She would buy me really expensive things for each month we had been dating and then pass it to him to give it to me. When we broke up, I removed myself from the picture as maturely as possible, but she slandered my name. She even called my best friend and her parents to tell her that her reputation would be tarnished by being friends with me. Needless to say, I got out. Boy moms, I swear to God. Story 21. I'm super late to this, but thought I would post anyway. The moment when I knew our relationship was over was when my ex-fiancé told me he had been cheating on me 3 months before our wedding. Wait for it. Who was his first cousin? Then told me he still wanted to work on our relationship. When I started to cry, he proceeded to choke me until I passed out, and when I woke up, I discovered he had roughened me up whilst I was unconscious. Example, when I woke up, my jaw was broken and I was in a pile of broken glass. This guy was super messed up. There were other warning signs that I should have listened to before this, but I was young and in love. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. Not near as bad as the ones I've been reading, but the 2 long-term relationships I've had were really emotionally cruel. They never had jobs, ever. I paid rent, bought food, bought cigarettes, paid all the bills and any entertainment they wanted, mostly computer games like Diablo or WoW. That was hard enough. I'm a single mom and I was taking care of my son and supporting another adult. They were mean. They would say the cruelest things but then break down and try to rationalize it, and in the end, I always felt bad for them. One always accused me of cheating, constantly. I wasn't even allowed to go anywhere but to work, so I have no idea where he thought I was finding the time. One called me stupid just about every day. He said I was a horrible mother. I was called just about every name possible almost every day, while I was supporting him. They both had terrible tempers. They rarely got physical, but I was scared of them anyway. I had no control. If an arm was raised to me, I would instinctively flinch and then get yelled at for flinching and told how manipulative that was to react to a raised arm. Both times it was just a last straw type of thing. Being accused of being a cheating witch one last time. Being called a stupid witch one last time. One day, I just said, enough. Get the heck out. We're done. This is my house. I pay the rent. Get your crap and leave. The first time I dealt with that for about 4 years, and then within 6 months, jumped into a live-in relationship with a name caller, and that lasted for about 2.5 years. That ended close to 7 years ago, and I've been pretty much single ever since. Still scared of people that have flaring tempers, though. These people need therapy. Story 23. This Friday, actually. It was a nice day in South Florida, so I was driving with my buddy and my brother with the windows down. Everything between us, me and the girlfriend, is going swimmingly at that moment. I saw her and her brother walking to their house, so me, being a good guy, pulled over and offered them a ride. My girlfriend's brother, I'll refer to him as Bill from now on, runs up with a shiny-looking can and stops. And I thought, he's messing with me. Then, not a moment later, he throws the full can of glitter into my car. A brand new Kia Optima. That's not even what ended it. I drove full speed and parked to my friends who lived near them, got out and walked toward them to confront him. When I got there, they were both laughing. Upon pushing him, I proceeded to punch the back of my neck. A cowardly way of fighting, if you ask me. The girlfriend just stood there and smiled when he did it. As I walked off, she asked if we were still dating. I told them both to screw off and that I don't want to see either of them again. Now I have to pay for an auto detailing and possibly to repair my AC. Are we still dating? Bruh. Story 24. My get the heck out moment was when my sister pointed out that her ex was claiming to be my then-girlfriend's current boyfriend. Apparently, the guy and my sister were hanging out and he wanted to show her a pic of his girl. He pulls up her FB profile and says, "Who the heck is this kissing her?" To which my sister says, "My brother. For 3 years, my ex was living a double let's make that triple life, because there was another guy that no one knew about. How the hell she juggled 3 guys without anyone catching is beyond me. I dumped her with a quickness. Went to the clinic and found out I had chlamydia but was asymptomatic, which had the nerve to call me and ask why I was mad at her. Why are you mad at me? Story 25. My ex was a fundy Christian, and I knew that her family was too, and I agreed to stay a few nights at her place over a summer in between years at university. I'm an atheist. I'd spent some time with them, and you could certainly tell they were Christian, but I'd never experienced anything too extreme from them. One night, we were playing this board game where someone is up, and they pick up a card that says something like favorite food, and everyone else writes down their favorite food. Then the person who is up tries to match the favorite food to the person. So anyways, it's her mom's turn. Her card says, how the world is going to end. And I just thought to myself, oh crap. I write down a meteorite or something along those lines, and then the time comes for her mom to guess. She reads all the cards out loud. A meteorite. God will set the world on fire. Her dad. God will send all sinners to hell. Her little brother. Judgment Day. Her. I'm freaking serious. As the cards were read, I was trying simultaneously not to laugh and to maintain breathing as I felt my face get redder and redder, and my palms and forehead start to sweat. It was a little bit awkward. Her mom had no problems guessing my card. A few days or weeks later, I asked her something along the lines of, so, do you think I'm going to burn in hell for all of eternity? And she replied, without much thought at all, yes. Bro. Crazy. Story 26. Well, we'd been having problems for a bit, but nothing was too serious. We were always one of those on-again, off-again couples, but hey, stuff happens. Well, on the 5th of July, my supposed best friend of over 12 years came over without asking. No big deal, but he's always the friend who asks before he shows up. Basically, he explains to me that he and her have been talking for a while and that they're going steady now. Needless to say, I was a bit upset. But this happened during one of our breaks, so I wasn't too salty. About an hour later, my other best friend of 5 years confessed to me that he and she had intimacy recently, too. Keep in mind that her and I were still talking about getting stuff fixed during all of this. When I confronted her about all of this, she actually asked if I would get together with her again. I feel bad about laughing in her face, but I wished her good luck with everything nonetheless. We don't talk much anymore, obviously. Do you want to get back together? Story 27. Moment I knew I had to get out. All right, one sticks out in my mind. Me, my ex, and her mom were heading to Future Shop on Boxing Day to see if she could get a loan to buy a new laptop. I was off looking at games and whatnot when I heard her mom start yelling at the employee at customer service. Apparently, since my ex didn't have 2 valid pieces of ID, she wasn't allowed to get the loan for the computer. So her and her mom are fighting about this the entire way back. My ex bickering about how it's not the employee's fault and how her mom shouldn't have yelled at her. Her mom saying it's stupid that you need 2 pieces of ID. Both points I agree with for the most part. The fight kept escalating until, I kid you not, my ex finally just let out this primal scream while we were in the car on the highway, grabs her mom's hair and pulls back as far and fast as she can, opens the car door and motions to jump out. I tried to leave the car at a red light and she yelled at me for trying to leave her. And that was that. Jeez. What? Okay. Story 28. Out of all these stories, I find mine not so awful or anything, but still makes me really sad. We haven't broken up yet, but everything is pointing in the same direction. We barely go out now. Sometimes I feel like I'm better off with my friends or training with my fresh esports team rather than actually doing something with her. We've been together for 1 year and 7 months, as of yesterday. The reason we're in this situation is that, as I said, we barely go out anymore and we keep on fighting and arranging discussions by whatever, mainly because she believes I don't care or love her anymore and it's everything on her head. Whenever we can go out, it's all wonders, but right after we don't see each other a couple days, something is a reason to fight. Be it if I go out with friends and or she forgets that I warned her about it, or if I go on a school trip, like yesterday as well, etc. I just realized I can't be with her, if that's how it's going to be. If we get really good for a day, an awful lot of fighting by Facebook chat or phone, going on the other days, I gotta be happy. And I can't be stressed by every little thing I do that I enjoy. It does get to a point. I get you, buddy. Story 29. When I was just out of high school, I was dating a guy who was a few years older than me. Although there were a lot of issues with this guy, the thing that made me realize I needed to break it off was when we had taken a trip to the beach and he wouldn't buy me any food. Sounds weird, but I didn't have any money with me. We were both starving, so he stopped off at a Dairy Queen and bought himself a meal. Nothing for me. Not even a $1 cheeseburger. I had to sit there and watch him eat. It's not that I expect things from guys. It just would have been common courtesy to either share or not eat in front of me. I would buy a meal for someone I loved if he had no money. I would buy a meal for a friend if they didn't have money. Something so basic made me see how selfish he was on top of all the other issues, so I ended it. Story 30. I was playing Cranium, board game with a group of friends. Boyfriend was my partner. He pulled a spelling card, which means the couple elects one person to attempt to spell a word correctly. He looks at me and says, "Clearly I'm the better speller and should take this one." I became enraged. He barely made it through high school and dropped out of community college. He was visiting me at college for the weekend and playing this game with all my new friends. I say, "Fine, go for it." I read him the word on the card, quiche. He begins to spell K-E-E. At this point, I get up and leave the room. It hits me that I cannot marry and procreate with a man who thinks quiche is spelled with a K. Dumped him a week later and began dating my now hubby. He can spell quiche, works on cars and electric circuitry. Quiche. Story 31. The whole relationship was a disaster, but I rationalized it and avoided a lot of the issues. I'd been married for 3 years and had a newborn baby when I found out he had been cheating on me since we had started dating. I was devastated and spent the first couple weeks wondering how this could have happened in such a good relationship. And one night, I was sitting in front of the fireplace and we were talking. Suddenly, a giant wave of realization hit me and I said, "You've always treated me like crap. I've never been happy. You were terrible to me." He has said since that before I even said anything, it was like my face changed and nothing was ever the same after that. And it took me a few more months to leave him. I separated our money, moved us into a place that was affordable on just my income, and bought him a car so that he wouldn't try to take mine. Then I kicked him out. In the meantime, he mistreated me in my sleep. It wasn't the first time he forced me with him, but it was the first time he had done it while I was unconscious. When I confronted him about it, he was very apologetic. Months later in a fight, he said that it never happened. I was crazy. I wanted it, etc., etc. That was the moment I realized, without a doubt, I'd done the right thing. I have not questioned my decision once since then. Story 32. Me and my ex got into an argument over the cost of a side of ranch dressing at the place we both worked. Our boss had made it clear if or how much we should charge for it. The customer came up and asked for one, so I asked my ex, who worked in the kitchen, for one, and he wouldn't give it to me and told me I had to charge for it. Later on, we had been drinking and got into a fight about it again, and it escalated into an argument about other things as well. I said screw it and said I was going home. I got in my car as he stormed off down the sidewalk. I started backing out of his driveway and looked over to see if he was still walking away, but I couldn't see where he went. Suddenly, I freaked out and slammed on the brakes. For some reason, I just knew he had laid down behind my car. I got out, and sure enough, there he was, laying there all scraped up. I must have barely hit him. I still don't know exactly because he wouldn't talk to me. It was never the same after that. I'm still kind of messed up from it, even over a year after breaking up with him. Oh, so you dated a psycho. Story 33. I was recently dating a guy for about 6 weeks. He was really nice and smart and funny, and we were getting on quite well. I was always a little wary, though, and not 100% sure why, but there was something a little off. He would have to run off every now and then to do an unspecified something, and he had this somewhat manic look in his eye, amongst other just slightly odd behaviors. So, predictably, one night I was at his place and trying to sleep, but kept getting up to him running around the room sorting tons of books. It hit me at about 4 in the morning that he had to be on speed. Of course, in hindsight, the signs were clear. Not eating a lot, not sleeping a lot, etc. When I realized it, I knew I was right. So I asked him in the morning, and yeah, turns out he had developed a little habit in college, but it was just a little substance. So I broke up with him there, and it was sad. Why does such a stupid little substance have to mess up nice people? Story 34. And he told me he loved me. Cue flashback. When he told me he was going to order seeds to plant his little vegetable garden and asked what kind of tomatoes I wanted, I told him, and not just that I like this type of tomato, but my mother and grandfather had both grown them, so they were kind of nostalgic. He looked at me and said, "Well, those aren't very good. Let's grow these instead. They're similar, but better." They weren't similar at all, and the time he showed up at my house to make dinner, which was nice, but brought his own wooden spoon and pepper cracker because I only had plastic and pre-ground and they were so much worse. When I told him he could leave a toothbrush in my place, and rather than thanking me, spent 10 minutes picking out the most fancy and expensive one there. And he told me that is the worst way to store anything when I threw tinfoil on top of a can to put in the fridge. And when he gave me a hard time for farting in my sleep, even after I told him to stop, but he'd feel free to burp or fart whenever he wanted because he was just a gassy person. And when I talked about traveling, he told me hostels were dumb. First class was worth the money, and why would you bother with dive restaurants? In that moment, at 12:02 a.m. on New Year's Day, I realized that he was just looking for a woman who agreed with the life he and his mother had already planned. It was that moment I realized he thought love was just a warm, fuzzy feeling. without requiring hard work and a lot of compromise. In that moment, I realized not only did I not, nor would I ever, love him, but he didn't love me either. He just thought he did. When I broke up with him, he said, "You just didn't give this a chance." No, John, you didn't give me a chance, and I freaking deserved one. Story 35. Similar-ish. Rather than the moment I knew I had to get out, he dumped me. I didn't want the breakup to happen. My moment of revelation was the one when I realized I no longer wanted him back. A dear friend of mine for 5 years passed away tragically at the young age of 24. Still trying to be friends with my ex, and all of my grief, I went to him for support, thinking he would be consoling because he had lost several friends at a young age so he could understand. Instead, he was rude, cold, hard, and basically told me to just deal with it and get over it. It was at that moment I wrote down a list of everything I liked about him and everything I didn't, and it hit me like a sack of potatoes that the whole relationship had been about me serving him, catering to him, and supporting him. But he never reciprocated any of that. After that conversation, we never spoke again. Well, good riddance. Story 36. I was in a verbally, emotionally, sometimes physically cruel relationship for 5 years. I always felt too weak and too in love to leave. A close family member passed away, and when I confessed this to my partner and that I would be going home for the funeral, instead of offering love or comfort or sympathy, he started screaming at me for having to take time off work. In my exasperation, I told him I hated him and turned on my heel to walk out of the room. While my back was turned, he picked up a bottle of orange pop and poured it all over me. Interestingly, this was the second time in our relationship he had given me a drink shower, and it was the last. I finally started taking the steps to escape that oppressive ridiculousness. Free for 7 years, married to the love of my life, and we're expecting our first child. Story 37. We had been dating for several months, and things were going quite well. She was extremely funny, intelligent, and attractive girl. Then one night while we were fooling around, I had a premature moment. Her response wasn't to accept my apology and a promise to perform better in 20 minutes. She instead punched me in the jaw while I was still in. I fell onto the bed at my side, curled up a little bit, and asked, somewhat scared, "What the heck?" I was seeing stars at this point, so I couldn't see her, but I could hear her making feral noises. Next, she kicked me square, effectively incapacitating me. I rolled off to the bed, curled up completely on the floor, and begged for it to stop. She came around after a minute or two and apologized profusely for her moment of spontaneous psychosis. I knew at that moment she was not the one for me and kicked her out of my apartment and life for good. Not the family jewels. Story 38. Everything was okay until I actually married her. After that, things went downhill, fast. The biggest problem was that I started to get sick constantly. I'd always had good health up until marrying her. One day, everything came into focus when we had someone else go to use the mayonnaise in the fridge. She freaked out and literally ran across the kitchen, grabbing it out of his hand. She calmly walked over and handed it to me, saying that I was the only one allowed to eat the mayonnaise. It was then that I realized she was probably intentionally poisoning me. Our relationship had always gone better when I was sick and helpless. She was widowed when I met her. I can't help wondering if her late husband was her victim. After we'd split and I was waiting to file for divorce, in Canada you have to wait 1 year before filing for an uncontested divorce. She phoned me out of the blue and wanted to know specifics about my life insurance policy. This came after a few months of no communication with no small talk. For the next few weeks, I found myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if she had hired a hitman to whack me. Sounds crazy? Besides my life insurance policy, I found out she would have been able to collect the second federal survivor's benefit from the government. She would have been able to continue collecting her late husband's and then mine. Sounds morbid, but I was worth more to her gone than alive. Story 39. I knew it was over when I moved back home to escape her and her roommate. My ex would never give me the one thing I always asked for. The truth, up front. She always waited till later, until we were arguing, to bring up the whole truth about something she did. Even little things, because it is such a good idea to wait until I am already stressed out to tell me you lied or withheld information. Not only that, but she always made me out to be the bad guy to her friends when it was always her cutting me down with her words when we argued. She never stood up for me, even when all I ever tried to do was stand up for her and give her confidence to stand up for herself. I finally got fed up and said something to her about it. I finally stood up for myself. We got into a really big argument and I packed my stuff the next morning and left after we talked. We broke up after I got back home. It was so drawn out and painful. I put all of myself into making it work. For nothing. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.